evening. My name is Brian Leib. I am the Executive Director of the Iranian Americans for Liberty. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the Iranian Americans for Liberty, it is my honor to welcome all of you to this evening's virtual congressional meet and greet with Congresswoman Claudia Tenney from New York. This evening's event is our 9th virtual congressional meet and greet of 2021, and we are very excited to be hosting the Congresswoman this evening. Before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our organization. The Iranian Americans for Liberty are a bipartisan group of Iranian Americans from all around the nation that are working together to support and strengthen U.S. foreign policy and national security solutions that bring democracy, human rights accountability, and freedom of speech to Iranians living under the oppressive Islamic Republic of Iran. Please visit our website at www.ia4l.org to learn a little bit more about our organization and to also join our email newsletter. Also, please be advised tonight's event is for educational purposes only, and all of our events are free and open to the public, but you are required to register for the event to get access to the events. So at this time, it's my pleasure to hand the program over to this evening's moderator, Adele Nazarian. Adele, the floor is yours. Have a great conversation with the Congresswoman.
Thank you so much, Brian, and welcome to this evening's virtual congressional meet and greet with Congresswoman Claudia Tenney of New York. My name is Adele Nazarian. I will be the host and moderator for this evening's conversation. Before we get started with the Q&A, I wanted to start by reading a short bio about this evening's special guest. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney was first elected to serve as a member of the United States House of Representatives on November 8, 2016, after winning one of the most expensive races in the nation. As a freshman member of the 115th Congress, she served on the House Financial Services Committee. Claudia was elected to the House of Representatives for a second time in November of 2020, in what was yet again among the most expensive and competitive congressional races in the nation. Prior to her election in November 2016, Claudia served as a member of the New York State Assembly. She was first elected to the Assembly on November 2nd, 2010. Claudia is an accomplished attorney and longtime small business owner. She was the co-owner and legal counselor to Mid-York Press Incorporated, a commercial printing and manufacturing firm started by her grandfather in 1946. Mid-New York Press currently employs nearly 70 people in the Chenango County community of Sherborne. Claudia also maintained a private law practice in Clinton, New York, powerhouse. Claudia currently serves on the House Small Business Committee and House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congresswoman Tenney, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We would like to turn it over to you for brief opening remarks before we start with our Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adele. That was wonderful. And thank you, Brian, for connecting me. It is such an honor to speak to all of you, and nothing warms the hearts of Americans than people that seek democracy and freedom, and people who come from countries where they're not, their own friends and family members are not experiencing that. And it's been a struggle for a long time. For Iran to come out of this, and we want to see, the well-educated, the amazing history, that comes from Iran that many people don't realize that we should highlight. It's a, one of the greatest cultures in the history of man, is at least recorded history, and we need to highlight that and get back to the roots that you had, and somehow get us to where we need to be. I felt like we were getting there, at least inching toward that potential. Freedom for Iranians back, in the last administration, had we had just a little more support, maybe, pushing a little harder. But unfortunately, we aren't there yet. And but I appreciate everyone's efforts and sacrifices to continue to try to make Iran, the future for young people there who might feel hopeless and might feel like there isn't a chance for them to experience freedom as we do here in the United States. Of course, we have our own issues and challenges, as all countries do. But one of the great things about the United States is we can amend our Constitution and we can correct our mistakes, which we've done many times throughout the history of this country, which is why it's so exciting for me to be, a person from a small community. My dad, it's funny, Adele and I just had a little connection. My dad actually was, the son of very poor immigrants and grew up in New Jersey. He was one of 9. 8 boys and 1 girl, and he was the first one in his family to go to college, and ended up in upstate New York. And he was the very definition of the American dream. He was always, bright, funny, positive, and also just always striving to be better, and always caring about his fellow man or woman in the community. Every one of us have done so much for our communities throughout our entire lives, and we're devoted to them. I mean, I live across the street from the house I grew up in, so you could say that I'm really committed, or else I haven't gotten anywhere in life sometimes. But it's wonderful, and it's interesting. A little tidbit is I do live in our former congressman's house, so I bought it from his widow, so it was his retirement home. So far, only 2 people who have lived in my house have been members of Congress. So if anyone wants to buy it, or if you want to be a member of Congress, come up to my district and buy my house, and you too can be a member of Congress. No, I'm kidding. But anyway, there's just so much that I think that Iran and the Iranian culture can bring to what we have in America. And just Adele and so many people that I've met and spoken with over the years. We do have a little bit of diaspora in New York, in upstate New York, with the Iranians, and they've added so much to our communities. I just want to take off the chains and make these people free, and to be able to be free in the Middle East and enjoy what so many other countries are just starting to experience. So I don't want to go on too long, because there's a long list of questions, and I do have to vote. So I have somewhat of a hard stop at 6:30, but I know you have a long list, so I want to try to get through as many as I can. So I'll leave it at that, and please feel free to ask any question. I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Love the New Jersey connection. Let's jump right into our Q&A. So you have been a strong voice and leader for small businesses in your district and around the country. Can you please explain why supporting small business and the small business community is so important to you?
Yeah, well, obviously I mentioned our business, and as you alluded to, we're celebrating our 75th year. It's amazing that we're even able to survive in New York, where we're in a bidding business. We bid on pharmaceutical packaging. We do some food packaging and some hospitality packaging, but we have to first overcome the obstacles that have been put in our way by New York State. It was easier in the old days, when things weren't so bad, but now we have high taxes, high regulatory regime. Now they're talking about even worse taxes. We have a difficulty finding employees who are qualified to do the work, although we're willing to train anybody. We're grateful to many dairy farmers who have given up their farms and come to work with us, because that's really what saved us. But our small business community is vitally important in upstate New York. I represent New York 22nd District, which is pretty rural and suburban. The main city is Utica. And Binghamton, which many of you probably know from Binghamton University, which has a lot of acclaim in the SUNY system, but also that's the home of IBM. The other interesting thing about New York is that actually Rome, New York, is where the first shovel was put in the ground to build the Erie Canal, which launched the Industrial Revolution in America. So we were the beginning of this Industrial Revolution. Immigrants came from all around the world to work and to grow New York. We were the Empire State, and we had it all at one point. Now we have the largest outmigration of any state in the country. We've just lost a congressional seat. It looks like that's going to be final. We used to have 50 congressional seats in the 60s. And I know that because I found my dad's old book that showed how many congressional seats were in there. So that's how much New York has declined on mostly one-party rule. We've had some Republican administrations here and there, but it's been very difficult to fight what's been going on in New York. So we, in my district, everyone thinks, it's these big businesses. I mentioned IBM, we have Revere Copper, Oneida was started in my district, Oneida Silversmiths, Oneida China, all those things that you read about, they're no longer, none of that's produced in our area. But we have all these great small businesses that are with a real entrepreneurial spirit. 94% of the workforce work for a small business, not one of these big companies. So that's one of the reasons I'm so committed to small business. They really create the jobs of the future, the jobs of today. We also have a huge farming industry. We produce a lot of dairy, we produce crops, we produce beef and a number of other meat products. And that is one of our biggest industries actually in my district. So, that's why we have to support small business. Without our small business community and the taxes they pay, whether it's real estate, sales tax, and everything else, we wouldn't be a community. We don't have a big anchor city like New York City or Rochester or Buffalo. We have this ag community, plus we have a lot of manufacturing that, unfortunately, many of it is leaving our region. So, but that's a similar story that you hear around a lot of the Rust Belt up in upstate New York, the Northeast, and that's something that, if we empower our small business community, they create 60% of the new jobs. So that's why I'm focused on small business, and it's also entrepreneurial, and it gives a chance to young people who want to start a business, who want to get, have some independence, who maybe don't want to work for, a big company, and they want to have their own business and their own skill set, and have the American dream. And so that's, the main reason that small business is everything to me. I'm honored to serve on the Small Business Committee, as I was to serve on financial services, where my focus there was also, small businesses, farms, small community banks, those types of businesses that actually service our small business community.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for that. We actually had Congressman Jim Hagedorn also from Minnesota, and he placed also emphasis on how important it is to have the farming community, the rural community to get more attention. And thank you so much for raising this issue in New York, where there's honestly a mass exodus. So for our next question, let's dive into your committee assignments. You're obviously you said yourself, on the House Committee on Small Business and the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. Can you please tell our audience a little more about what your current focus is on the House Foreign Affairs Committee?
Yeah, on foreign affairs, obviously our big issue is, restoring America's dominance in the world, because we know that we're the beacon of democracy. We're a constitutional republic, but we have democratic principles. And also just making sure that we keep China in check, and some of these, these industries that have come in and really just cannibalized and harvested off of New York jobs. And that's something that has affected me personally in our business. And on foreign affairs, making sure we have economic strength is going to, make sure that we have diplomatic strength. And so China has been cheating. They've been stealing intellectual property. If you want to just Google my name, I've done a number of articles on China in the past, and the real problem with intellectual property, whether, we need to bring our supply chain back. I don't know if any of you know, but microchips are in scarce supply right now, which is holding up the ability to produce cars. Lumber is extremely expensive. I mean, we have lost so much from this COVID virus that hasn't come back because of the shutdowns, and also, the policies of the new administration to see this, abysmal jobs report that we just had. So there is a lot that we need to focus on in foreign affairs, but, getting to China, making sure that we have peace in the Middle East, that the Abraham Accords are kept in place. I strongly oppose getting back into the JCPOA. I think it's a mistake. I think the pressure that the Trump administration was putting on Iran, I think we were close. I think we're getting close to finding some more peace and a potential chance for freedom for Iranian citizens who, have been denied this too long. I mean, I remember I graduated from high school in 1979 when the Ayatollah took over. I remember this. And in 1981, I actually was in the former Yugoslavia as a student, and I was right across the street from the Iranian embassy. And as American students, we were like, wow, this is really wild. And we just had the whole transition from Jimmy Carter to Reagan, and the hostages and the whole thing. And but it's interesting because, there's so much that we could do to really, I feel like promoting peace in the Middle East is really a priority. And I'll tell you just a little anecdote. I was at an event in Binghamton last year, and it was a room full of Lebanese immigrants, now citizens in my community. And all of them were saying, can you get Trump to do a deal with Lebanon and the United States and Israel? Because we want to get away from where we are. We want to rebuild Lebanon to what it was in its glory and go back. So, I think the progress that they were making, I think is good. I did hear President Biden say that he was not going to be dismantling the Abraham Accords and keeping the peace agreements in place as we chip away and bring more pressure. But I mean, that's my focus, is obviously Middle East peace, is something that we've all dreamed about. I mean, I remember even when I was a kid, dreaming about that. But those are the focuses on right now on foreign affairs. I mean, we have a little kind of pocket issue in my district. I have like 4,000 to 5,000 Burmese refugees. I have a very large refugee community, by the way. And so we're working hard to help our Burmese refugees, because there is, this terrible coup that happened on February 1st, the military coup. We've been doing resolutions. We put in place an arms embargo to countries who are giving arms and promoting and helping out the military because they've taken over the democratically elected officials, and they're in exile somewhere. And so we want to restore democracy and we want to restore Burma as well. So that's just sort of a smaller issue. Just happen to have a huge community of Burmese in my district. But Utica has actually been awarded, a lot or lauded a lot for our refugee community. We have something like between 18 and 20,000 refugees who have come in over the years. The first group was the Bosnian refugees. They came in the early 90s, right after the war in Yugoslavia. And just a little side note, I did actually, after visiting Yugoslavia as a student, I ended up working for the Yugoslav consulate in the 80s and worked on the Olympics in Sarajevo. So I got to work a lot at the UN and with the mission to Yugoslavia and the UN and the diplomatic arena, which is why I love the Foreign Affairs Committee. My trips to the Middle East have been amazing. I mean, I've been all over. I've never been to Iran, obviously, not now. But wouldn't it be great if we could go back and celebrate Persian culture? It'd be amazing if we could all go there.
Absolutely. I haven't been myself. When that day comes, we must go together.
Let's go together.
Absolutely. So let's shift now to some domestic policy issues. During the 2020 campaign cycle, law enforcement obviously was a major issue all around the country. Can you please tell us a little bit more about your record as it relates to supporting law enforcement?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'll try to be quicker because I want to try to get through all your questions. I hate to have anything unanswered. Yeah, law enforcement is critical. I mean, in the United States, we have this thing called the rule of law. And if we don't support the rule of law, you're going to have, in legal terms or in legal scholarship, it's called the rule of men. And that means that it's subject to the whims of whoever political party or whatever political party or leader is in power. And we can't have that happening. We have to respect the law. We have to enforce the law. And remember something, when our country was founded, the United States back in it was actually 1789 when New York finally agreed to sign the Constitution, because New York lagged behind because they were concerned about rights. And one of the main reasons that New York did not sign on was because they wanted to preserve their sovereignty. But the main reason also is the colonies needed an entity, the federal government, to protect their security, protect their borders, and protect them and provide national defense, because they couldn't do it in such a divided way. And that was the main reason we created the federal government in the first place. So it's a primary obligation for government, and it's an appropriate and proper use of taxpayer money to provide security. If we don't have security and safety in our communities, we have nothing. It's a dangerous world. And you're seeing that the Democrats' policies of defund the police, of eliminating, for example, qualified immunity, which is something that protects police officers when they're working, and getting rid of qualified immunity or preserving qualified immunity doesn't mean that officers couldn't be held liable for any kind of civil or criminal penalties there, or civil penalties that may happen. They still could be held liable, but qualified immunity in the commission of crimes is really just, to me, a windfall and a boondoggle for the trial bar. It's just one more person they can sue. Even in New York State, they're now demanding that our police officers carry liability insurance for working as police officers. My Lord, we're having a hard enough time getting good people, getting them trained. So I've supported our police effort. Obviously, it's very important. I voted against the new revised George Floyd policing bill, which would really just continue to erode our safety and security. I've spoken out. I didn't get to vote on it in New York State Assembly, but I've spoken out against bail reform. It is a terrible policy. You could talk to any police officer, regardless of whether it's municipal, a state trooper, whomever. They all tell you how terrible this bail, this new bail reform is, and this no bail policy. We're literally letting people back on the street. So, it's really important. If we have no law and order and safety, we have no communities.
Absolutely. And thank you. This actually feeds into the next question that I wanted to ask you. I want to thank you for your support for law enforcement. We agree it's a non-negotiable. Thank you for being so outspoken about it. Let's talk a little bit about House Resolution 1. You've been very, if that's okay with you, you've been very vocal in exposing the truth about this resolution by the Democrats, and have a section on your website called Setting the Record Straight. I love it. Can you please set the record straight on what's really in House Resolution 1, also known as HR 1?
Yeah, HR 1 is probably the most destructive piece of legislation that has been before Congress and maybe in decades. And HR 1 is guised as better elections, access to voting, and all this nonsense that the Democrats have, Nancy Pelosi has put in there. I know there are Democrats who don't support it, but I think they feel like they are so bullied by the far left that they can't really vote against it. They already, 100% of them voted on the floor of the House. So if there's anyone at this point who is more qualified to talk about elections than I am, I have been in two very close elections, including the longest election of last cycle. I actually didn't get sworn in until February 11th because of the election irregularities in
Wow.
my race. The judge actually in my race, who was a Democrat and elected democratically, Supreme Court Justice, he decided not to stop at the procedural barriers in my election case. And we were actually registering, I don't mean counting votes, registering voters in January and February of 2021 whose votes were cast in the November 2020 election. That's how far this judge was able to go and did go to make sure that every legal vote counted. We have rules in place and we need integrity in our elections, which is why I formed the Election Integrity Caucus with my colleague, Mike Garcia, who also won a very narrow race in California. We have a great affinity. He's a Naval Academy graduate. My son's also a Naval Academy graduate. So, we've got the Navy graduate and the Navy mom. So but this bill is really a takeover of the political system. It's partisan. It would instill partisan principles. And don't listen to them when they said that we want to suppress votes. Nothing could be further from the truth. And in fact, when I tell you that judge decided to count votes and actually register voters into February of 2021, that meant every legal vote counted. We were not trying to suppress votes. My opponent, whose lawyer was the famous Mark Elias, who represented Joe Biden in all the presidential races and who has represented the Democrats, tried to unseat Marionette Miller Meeks in Iowa's 2nd district. He actually, at the very end, they were throwing up their arms and said, "Oh, there's a problem with Dominion voting machines." And I was like, "Are you kidding me? Dominion voting machines? You mean those things that you said that were perfectly, it was the greatest, best, safest, fair election ever in 2020. Now all of a sudden there's a problem with Dominion voting machines." I'm going to tell you right now, we didn't have a problem with Dominion voting machines. But the reason HR 1 is so dangerous, it would publicly fund elections, which means the taxpayers would be paying for this. It would disallow boards of elections to have any kind of sanity as far as controlling the voter rolls, and maintaining the voter rolls is critically important. It would allow that to happen with the Department of Motor Vehicles, government agencies, universities and colleges would actually be registering voters. I mean, how fair is that? That's ridiculous. It undermines the integrity and dilutes the vote of legitimate votes. So we don't want that to happen in our communities. We want to make sure that people feel confident about voting. In fact, we think voting is sacred. We think every person who is legally able to vote in this, and I'm in a self-governing constitutional republic, which is one thing that Lincoln always talked about. Can we save this self-governing constitutional republic? Can we actually govern ourselves? And that's the big question. And if we can't vote and we can't get people to vote and be active and part of this community, we want more people to vote. Don't listen to Stacey Abrams, the governor of Georgia. Oh, wait, she didn't win. Why are we talking about her? Wasn't that election stolen from her? Just saying. Sorry to be partisan there, but when I'm in the middle of this election thing, look, we want everyone to vote. We think it's sacred, and we don't want to suppress the vote. We want people to be legal, but there are places where vote harvesting can occur. Databases are created. Third parties can interfere. Mark Zuckerberg spent $350 million, a private person, helping and assisting governments. That's inappropriate. That's a form of what they call electioneering, which is like hustling votes and interfering with government role. We have to protect the government's role. We have to make sure that our boards of elections are funded and trained and watching and looking out to make sure that every legal vote is counted. So HR 1 is a disaster. It's a Democrat takeover of this country forever if it passes. The Senate is actually going through SR 1 now, which is the Senate companion. If it passes, I mean, I don't know where we're going to end up. I mean, it's going to be a disaster for this country. And there's a reason, and I know you've probably heard this there's a reason HR 1 is the priority of the Democrats, because it's all about power. It isn't about preserving and protecting American values, freedom, individual rights, and all those things that our Constitution uniquely protects. If their number one priority was the Green New Deal, it would have been HR 1. If their number one priority were infrastructure, it would have been HR 1. If our number one priority were any of their other initiatives out there, they would have been HR 1, but it's not. It's political power and takeover. And so that's what you need to know and why we need to defeat it any way we can. If you're out there and you have a senator that you can call, particularly a Democratic senator, please call them and urge them not to vote for SR1.
Thank you so much. And by the way, I just want to say, it's not partisanship when you're speaking facts. So
Yeah,
facts are always the facts, right?
well, it's just funny how the media, just decide, they're so selective.
Absolutely. No, I come from the media world, so I understand fully well how things are skewed. So we've covered some domestic issues. I want to switch over to some foreign policy questions, whatever time we have left. The Islamic Republic of Iran constantly chants death to America and death to Israel, the great and small Satans, ever since they came to power in 1979. Why do you think the current administration is so eager to loosen economic sanctions on a regime that clearly does not like the United States of America and our allies?
We have to wonder why. It appears that John Kerry is leading the charge on this, and we've seen, and there's been proof that there's been some inappropriate or alleged inappropriate behavior by him in dealing with Iran. I don't know why he's pushing this. They've claimed there's conflicts of interest with his children, with other people in the administration. We had the recent article in the New Beacon, in the Free Beacon, that talked about this new person in, what's her name,
Tabatabai, Ariane.
Yeah. What's your first name? Ariane, right?
Ariane. Mm-hmm.
Ariane, yeah. So Ariane, and a number of my colleagues have called that out and said that we should, before we approve her, we should definitely look to see if she has any, if she's compromised in any way with the regime. I don't understand why they're doing this. I mean, it seems to me that they do have some potential conflicts. I hope that's not the case. But I don't think that they look at the situation with force and strength. And there's one thing the Iranian regime is, I think, they react to an assertion of power or an assertion of weakness. And we are asserting weakness now. And I think our assertions of power in terms of working around them and trying to isolate them and work against their coordination with terrorist groups around the Middle East, I think was effective in the last administration. And I just don't understand why they feel that, the diplomatic answer is fine, but you cannot project weakness if you want to, win over the Iranian regime at this point. I think they need to feel intimidated like they were. And I think that, Secretary Pompeo and President Trump and their team did a great job of isolating them and really empowering so many other states who are feeling the pressure. We want this regime to be gone because we want to see a democratic Iran. So I don't know. I mean, that's a question that we'll see where Secretary Blinken goes from this point. He hasn't projected a lot of strength at this point. He's done a lot of lecturing, but he hasn't projected a lot of strength. And they really need to step up and not allow them to continue to work behind the scenes with Hamas, with the Houthis and others. I'm very concerned about that position, actually. I'm very concerned that they're not projecting strength.
Thank you. And it actually goes into our next question, which focuses on the current administration, the Biden administration, as you might, or as some might call it, the Harris administration. As you might know, world leaders are currently in Vienna, and they're having discussions related to the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, Iran deal. The Iranian regime has stated that they will not entertain any conversations with the Biden administration unless the US removes all economic sanctions and re-enters the JCPOA with zero conditions placed on the regime. What do you think about the JCPOA, and should we be negotiating with the Iranian regime?
First of all, I think that it would be a mistake to rejoin the JCPOA without extremely stringent standards. We know they're continuing to enrich uranium. We know they're continuing to support and actually secure and be the greatest sponsor of terrorism around the world, particularly in the Middle East. But I think, again, the Biden administration, the Iranian regime, and this is just my opinion, I think they smell the blood in the water, they smell the weakness, and they're going to take advantage. And they're going to say, oh, and now, we need to be forceful with them, and we're not being forceful. And I don't think that we're going to get anywhere with them as long as we project the weakness. And, of course, they're claiming, lift the sanctions. I'm worried we are going to lift the sanctions because we had the sanctions. We had the Soleimani, killing. We had all these issues that really put Iran in a situation where we thought we could almost get them. I think, a few more years of pressure, I think we could have seen some real progress even beyond that. But I mean, I don't know, the regime, at this point, I mean, I don't think Biden is projecting strength in any way. I don't think he can. And it's certainly, I read an article the other day, and I just went to the U.S. border, not to get on a tangent, but I'm bringing back this. I mean, when you talk about Vice President Harris, I saw an article about her talking about space and talking about the Space Force and getting more involved in, that type of in the space world. And I was like, she's going to go to the moon before she goes to the southern border. She's going to do all these things to avoid having to deal with this issue. And it is probably one of the most critical issues we face in foreign policy now is this Iran problem. And I think they're going at it wrong. I think they're, again, projecting weakness, relenting to the regime. John Kerry has not been helpful. I think he needs to be called out. I've called him out. I mean, this is wrong, what's happening. But we'll see where they go from there. I mean, Vice President Harris doesn't project any strength either. And it almost seems like she doesn't know what she's doing. And, even just from a diplomatic, viewpoint, I mean, when the Japanese came to the White House to be greeted, they were greeted by Vice President Harris, not by the president. That was a protocol error, I think. So I think they're making a lot of mistakes on foreign policy where, the US should be the leader of the world because, we are the beacon of freedom. We are, strength. We should be maintaining our economic strength, which, the Belt and Road Initiative in China is undermining that as well, which we're not really, we have the most compromised president in China right now. And, the most compromised probably politician in the White House on China.
Absolutely. And the whole China connection may be the reason for the Japanese gap, as we like to call it. So speaking of the Iranian regime, we'll focus on that though. It's widely known that the Iranian regime funds terrorism all around the world. In recent years, the regime provided material support to Hamas in Israel, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthi rebels in Yemen. What can Congress do to continue to freeze the regime's financial assets that fuel terrorism around the world?
That's something we've been doing. And I had a chance to ask actually Secretary Blinken about what's going on with the Houthis. They're denying whether or not, Iran really were able to shoot the missiles at that Saudi port. And obviously Iran, the Houthis don't have the capability or the range. And we know that was coming from, originally, from Iran. And I mean, again, it's the same question again. How are we going, if we continue to project what we're doing and not really engaging with our partners and allies in the Middle East in a way that's productive? There's obviously, the breaking news now is there is some activity in Israel, which is not good. And that could be, I worry about that sort of unrest and the lack of strength and the lack of reliability that the United States is portraying. We're back to being an unreliable ally. And I think a lot of people in the world, especially in the Middle East, were relying on our strength. And now without that strength, you're seeing these terrorist groups getting emboldened and getting out there and, disrupting and causing issues in Israel and around Yemen and in Saudi Arabia and all over the Middle East. And I just worry, my son actually is a Marine who was deployed in 2017. He was actually in Kuwait and Iraq. And the situation there is, we are in a crossroads right now, and I hope it doesn't slip away. I'm very worried about this administration not having the real power to do what they need to do, especially economically. Obviously, we need to rebuild and have that behind us as well.
Absolutely, and thanks to your son. God bless him for his service to our.
Thank you.
So the regime in Iran spends billions of dollars, obviously funding terrorism, which we just discussed. I mean, this is an issue that, frankly, most Iranians in Iran do not support.
Right.
They'd rather see these billions, honestly, spent on infrastructure, roads, and schools. What is your message to the people of Iran that might be listening this evening to this event? Do you stand with the Iranian people in their quest for freedom and freedom from the tyrannical regime in Iran?
As I said, I mean, we have one of the greatest cultures in mankind. It spawned in Iran. I mean, it's amazing, the Persian culture and what's happening there in the history. And we have people that are seeking freedom. I always remember watching the 2009 freedom uprising where the United States, kind of ignored it, which was too bad. But I want the Iranian people to know that we have members in Congress and we have members in leaders in our communities and our legislature that do support you and do want your freedom and want to project strength and want to give the Iranians a chance for freedom, as I indicated in the beginning of the call. I'm concerned about every aspect. Women's rights. You have that. You're coming to that question. I mean, we've got women's rights issues there. I mean, look at how many amazing women have come out of Iran with strength, brilliant, writing books, doctors, all kinds of people that have come we are not getting access, the world is not getting access to these great people and their talents. And so, we've got to figure out a way to get around this regime and really eliminate it. And I just feel like we were close, but I don't want to give up hope, because I think we do have hope. I think the more people have access to information that the media isn't blocking, unfortunately, we have some big tech issues, but the more information that we can get to people, especially maybe people listening, that there is a hope, there is a chance for freedom. We care about getting you the hope and freedom that you need. We're fighting for you. We want to see it happen. I mean, there is nothing more exciting than the struggle for freedom, that someone actually achieves it at some point. It is a breathtaking moment when someone's able to get to that point. And so I feel like that breathtaking moment is here for Iran, but I don't know if it's going to happen under this regime unless they dramatically change their focus. And we really have to fight for the Iranian people. When they stand up for democracy and they cheer on democracy, we need to support them as Americans. We need to do that. We need to make gestures and also take strong stands and not be afraid to do that, and not be worried about the John Kerrys of the world who are going to undermine and talk about bureaucratic issues. And he's focused on climate change right now, but but I mean, think of the rich resources and things that are being denied the people of Iran. Being under this, this totalitarian regime is tragic that it's been going on this long. I mean, 1979, we were 42 years ago.
Because nuclear bombs don't kill, right? Climate change as well. Well, anyway,
Yeah.
there is hope when we have representatives like you fighting for the people, and thank you for standing with the Iranian people. Just for our last question, do you have time?
Oh yeah, I'm like, they haven't called votes yet. I got like 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe.
So, the UN Women's Rights Commission recently placed Iran, they did an anonymous vote, private vote on their commission. I mean, in Iran, women are legally considered half that of a man and have been oppressed by the ruling class of Iran for decades. What is the UN thinking by placing the world's most notorious human rights abuser on this commission for women's rights?
The UN is a constant perplexing entity. We give them so much money and they're so disappointing and there's so much power. Like, back to I have a resolution before the Security Council on the arms embargo to the Burmese military who are killing people on the streets, peaceful protesters, and have taken over a democratically elected government. But it is very frustrating when the Security Council doesn't act on these things, and when the UN undermines its own integrity when it does things like this. I mean, how could you possibly put them on the Human Rights Commission, let alone the treatment of women, as you mentioned? I don't know. It's appalling. So I'm not an advocate for eliminating the UN. I don't know how we reform it. I think that's something that everyone's been looking at. I think it's a necessary organization, but I think we need to change it and change the mission, and also look at, I mean, it's very hard to, it's almost like an immovable object. When I worked in the consulate, I used to go to the mission all the time and go to the UN and work with a lot of the people over there. There are a lot of good people that work in the diplomatic field, but there are also a lot of people that probably shouldn't be in the diplomatic field. And I just think that the UN needs a serious upgrade. I'm open to ideas about how we, make a change there. But the U.S. is the host, and we need to be much more forceful and promote our policies and our country because we are hosting this organization, because we have a great record on all of those things. And that's something we can't allow them to continue to crush us with that.
Thank you so much. I'd love now to let you provide some closing remarks if you have time.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you again to Adele and Brian. I know he's somewhere out there in the ether. I can't see you all. But I want to just say thank you again for taking the time and for supporting me and giving me the chance to speak with you, because it's really, a really unique opportunity for me to get to speak to people who are fighting for their homeland and their homeland to have peace and to have democracy. And, what a great statement that is. And, I'm just honored to be able to meet all of you. I hopefully will meet some of you on there and online. I can't see you, but I would hope to meet you, because that's what we're fighting for here. We're fighting to preserve and protect the freedom that we have, that I feel like is under attack. So bringing people into the community who want to preserve freedom, who want to make sure that others can share in this, great freedom that we enjoy here, I think is inspiring. And I just want to say thank you to you and for all that you do in fighting on this front. I am here as a resource. I'm here as an advocate. I want to do what I can to help you and help the Iranian people get peace and prosperity and democracy in the Middle East. So, oh, they're coming in, man. I know. I'll be there in 2 seconds. So I just want to say thank you again to you, and I would love to do, speak with people again, come up with another set of questions. I feel like I'm happy to answer anything. I'm honored to be in this role. I know it's been a tough fight for me. I've had $47 million spent against me because I've only done all I've wanted to do is tell the truth. I didn't even get into politics until I was 50, but I'm so committed to this country and preserving it and protecting it, for my son, my grandchildren that I hope to have someday. And for everyone, I think everyone should be able to enjoy what we have and not lose it. And I feel like sometimes, it's your organizations and others that actually feel more of a sacred bond to what we have, and we don't appreciate what could be slipping away from us.
Freedom is always one generation away from being lost, right? Got to fight for it.
Yes, Ronald Reagan.
Yep, the great. Thank you, Congresswoman Tenney, for the time. The Iranian Americans for Liberty, thank you, and everyone for joining us. Our next virtual meet and greet will be held on May 25th with foreign policy experts Elon Berman and Sean Derns. So the question will be, do Americans benefit from diplomacy with Iran? Please visit www.ia4l.org to register. Thank you again, Congresswoman Tenney. Until next time, I'm Adele Nazarian. Have a great evening.